Did you know that you could grow peppers in pots? I'm situated next to one of my favorites. This is a Shishito pepper. They're from Japan and they are slightly sweet and smoky and not generally hot, but sometimes they can be. Whoa. To get started growing peppers in pots, I recommend a container that's at least 12 inches in diameter. The one that I'm growing this specific pepper in is probably around 3 gallons in size. And from there, you want a well-draining potting mix. I probably used the Happy Frog potting soil initially, but I will say that I often reuse my potting mixes from season to season, and at that point I may mix in a little bit of fresh potting mix or some compost. I like to top that soil with a nice mulch. This can help to conserve moisture throughout the growing season, help to protect some of the microbes that are there helping the plant grow and produce fruit for me. And for that, I'll use pine needles or pine straw. Likewise, you could use some bark that you find growing under a large shade tree, such as the pecan that's growing in front of my house. Oftentimes, I'll scavenge for that, and I'll use that to top dress my container grown peppers. In the end, I probably end up with around 3 inches of mulch. And if you're using some type of bark, I would recommend that you go in there and pull that away from the base of the plant, because over time you could be promoting some bacteria and decay on those living plant parts. If you're new to the channel, I'm Scott from New Garden Road, always out here to inform, inspire, and elevate you. Encouraging biodiversity and restoring habitat is my mission, one garden at a time. I'm growing 2 Shishito peppers in pots this year. They're both in these white clay pots. I like that because they have some breathability and you'll get the soil more equally drying in between waterings. It's good for the roots to have some drying. You don't want them to go bone dry, but you don't want them to sit in moisture excessively, especially when it's really hot, because hot and wet equals rot. Either way, you need to have a balance, and I like to stick my finger in the top of the soil, and that tells me everything I need to know, because if it's moist, I'll know pretty quickly. And if you stick your finger down there a few inches, then you get a good idea of how much water it needs and also how regular it will need water. This will vary based on the environmental conditions, the amount of wind, the sun exposure, but those are just some guidelines. And at this point in the season, I am watering them daily, typically in 2 passes. I'll give them about 5 seconds each. You want to let that water slowly penetrate and permeate the soil and not really go out to the sides and drain out to the bottom. You want to try to mimic a slow, deep soaking. You can grow quite a few varieties of peppers in pots like this, not just these Shishito peppers. You could try some bell peppers, some jalapenos, and you know, the sky's the limit really. Some chilies, you know, you could do that. I've done a lot of different ones before, including some snacking peppers, the sweet peppers. That's a lot of fun, and you can get some different colors growing. But one thing I want to talk about is the need for staking. Now, this pepper plant, you can see it's got a pretty good balanced branching structure, and oftentimes we will prune them once they get to be about 8 to 10 inches tall to encourage branching, and that will give you more surface area for fruit production, which is what we want. Now, depending on the variety that you're growing, it could, you know, require some additional support, and that could be something like a stake in the pot, and then you want to fasten it up high to give it a point of integrity, and that will keep them stable when we get high winds or storms, as well as when it starts to get loaded up on fruit, then it sometimes can get top heavy. So staking may or may not be necessary depending on the variety that you're growing. You could also use something like a tomato cage. A small tomato cage would work really well. It may be based on the size of the container that you're growing in. This one is not very big, so I could probably put a small tomato cage in here, but it would be important to do it early in the growth stages because it's a little bit more difficult to get it over the plant, and I don't want to damage it in any way. So right now, if I needed to give it some support, I'm more likely to put a stake in here and tie it off. But to me, it feels pretty sturdy. It's not too tall. The other one that I'm growing is even more loaded up with fruit right now, and it's doing well. It's got a good balance to it. It doesn't seem to be leaning. So that's something you have to keep an eye on and consider whether or not you will need to stake your pepper plants. For ongoing maintenance of your peppers in pots, you want to feed them. Feed those veggies so they'll feed you. For this, I like the Neptune's Harvest fish fertilizer. Check it out. That's the good stuff right there. I have been using this for well over a decade. I have partnered with Neptune's Harvest. They're helping me out in my garden supplies. They sent me this, so thank you for that. This is a high quality product. It's a byproduct of the fishing industry, so they are putting the fish to work. And the way that I like to use it is really straightforward. I'll mix it up in a watering can and drench my container peppers with a couple of rounds. I like to call this the 2 sips method, but you give them, again, just no more than they can drink in a sitting. Think about yourself. You can only drink so much water at one time. If you try to drink too much water, it spills out the side of your face, right? The same premise is going to apply when watering plants in general, especially when we're looking at containers, because that extra water is going to take the path of least resistance, come out the drainage hole in the bottom. So just go slow, control the volume, give it several passes, and I'm probably looking to give them at least about a quart for each plant once a week. That can really stimulate some new growth and some strong peppers. And about once a month, I'll come in and pull back the mulch and drop in a nice layer of compost or worm castings. That will really help to feed the soil microorganisms, which will translate to a healthy and productive plant. I planted these peppers in the middle of April, and for my growing region here in Travis County, Texas, you can plant peppers from transplants, which is basically a seedling that's already has leaves and is growing. You can plant them between mid-March through early May. You can probably play with that a little bit, but that's a good guideline for understanding when you can expect a harvest in ideal growing conditions, because if you plant them too early, they may be susceptible to cold temperatures, which would be bad. If you plant them too late, that could push them into hotter times of year, which they may be more stressed and less likely to produce good fruit for you. Alternately, you can plant peppers for a fall harvest, and that window is actually coming up right about now. This is the first week in July, and when we get to the second half of July through early August, you have another window for planting pepper transplants. Again, a transplant is not planting from seed. That's really important when it comes to the timing. Planting from seed is a great option, and it gives you access to many varieties, but you have to have a lot more control in place. Many times you have to plant those seeds inside, and you need like a humid dome to keep the humidity and moisture in. You might need a heat mat, and that can help to expedite germination. Pepper seeds in general can take a good bit of time before they germinate, so a heat mat when starting out can be helpful. But I like planting them from transplants because I only need, 1 or 2 pepper plants. If you get a pack of seeds, you may have 50 or more seeds in there. Do you need 50 pepper plants? Maybe you do. That's great. But that would be the difference. I think you're going to pay $3 for a plant, or you're going to pay $3 for a pack of seeds, and you have to go through that process of getting them up to speed, and it takes longer, more care. I haven't tasted these Shishito peppers recently, so I don't know if any of them are spicy, but I want to tell you a quick story because many times I like to snack on fruits as I'm in the garden. Peppers being one, and Shishitos are my favorite. So oftentimes I'll take one off the plant, and I know that they're generally not spicy, but I don't even think about it, and I'll eat the whole pepper. Now they can be really good, but when I get one of those spicy ones, it just catches me by surprise and sets me on fire. What can I say? When I'm out here working, I get hungry, and growing food is what it's all about. I do like to harvest frequently. This will encourage more flowering and fruiting, so more peppers end up on my plate. In talking about the details for harvesting peppers at the optimal time, of course, it will vary by the variety that you're growing, but with these Shishito peppers, I really am looking for something that's nice and kind of firm and glossy. The size will vary based on environmental conditions, the way it's grown in terms of how much nutrition and health it has overall. But you can see some of these are larger than others. I've had them easily get 2 to 3 inches long and probably about 1 inch in diameter. These are a little bit smaller. I'm not real surprised because it's been 100 degrees. It's been really hot, so that kind of inhibits their ability to mature and grow in a robust way. The environmental conditions are just a little bit less ideal. Now, I want to point out, you see this one that's red here? There are a lot of red peppers that we can grow, but this is not one. This is past its prime. I really want to harvest them prior to them turning red, because at this point, the skin is becoming more coarse, and I don't really know of any applications for dried shishito peppers. There may be some. Let me know in the comments if you know, but I look for some that are more like this size. I've got my favorite pair of Corona pruning shears here, and I just sharpened them so they're nice and sharp, which is good because you can damage the plant if you try to pull it off by hand, and you don't want to do that because you would be risking not growing as many peppers in the future. So I'm going to take this nice pair of sharp pruners and I'm going to cut it at the stem. All right, so I just picked a shishito pepper and it looks good. Should I try it out? Let's do it. Maybe it's hot. Oh, it got a little heat to it. Whoa. Yeah. That one was a little spicy. Not as spicy as I've had in the past, and it took a second. But see what I mean? I just can't resist eating the whole pepper. Yeah. Spicy, but not too spicy. I think it's really delicious. Lots of flavor, touch of sweetness, just kind of luscious. Yeah, I love these peppers. Now, the more you pick, the more you get, because this plant is essentially trying to reproduce, right? And it's got seeds inside these fruit. That's what it's doing. So you see these little white flowers. Each one is the potential for another pepper. And pepper plants are primarily self-pollinating. They're likely aided by insects, but they have everything they need inside that flower to pollinate themselves. Now, if you live in a hot, humid climate like I do, it could be beneficial, and you can do this with eggplants and tomatoes because they're in the same family. You could give them a little tap. You know, some people like to use an electric toothbrush or something like that. You wouldn't catch me out here like that, but I will go like this, kind of like dancing on the stems with the flowers. Now, how much that helps, I don't know, but I got a lot of peppers. Plenty for me, at least. So those are just some tips for harvesting peppers, knowing when is the right time and some of the best ways to do it. It is possible to overwinter your peppers with some protection, and you can get more than one growing season out of them. I've got one example to share with you. This is growing in a fabric pot. This is the Ahi Cristal. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, all right? But this is a terrific pepper. Now, it does need staking. Please don't judge me on that. But nonetheless, it has produced pretty well this season, and this is a spicy yet fruity pepper. I've become addicted to it somehow. I'm not really a spicy pepper person, but these sliced up, topped on a dish, or just snacked on, woo, get you going. And also, this is growing and has produced in partial sun. So you've got some versatility with your pepper plants, and throughout a long, hot growing season, that may benefit you. Find a spot in your garden that has afternoon shade or even some dappled light combined with some morning sunshine, and see what you can grow. Now check out more awesome gardening videos on my channel, like this video, and follow New Garden Road for weekly content. You can grow peppers in pots. Keep it organic.